Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming today to listen to me tell you about safety data sheets. This is a critical issue that I just don't feel enough people know about. Now, I have a new job which coincidentally puts me in the forefront of safety data sheets, and thus in the 5 days that I've had my new job, I have now acquired more information than I have ever had in my entire life about safety data sheets, and I would now like to share that information with you today. So you might be saying, Jim, safety data sheets, I've never heard of that before. Could you please explain to me what it is? And I will. But first, let's have a talk about hazardous chemicals. Because arguably, every conversation you get involved in always comes back to hazardous chemicals, right? Anyway, so hazardous chemicals are a part of life. And although we refer to them as hazardous chemicals, and instinctively we say that's a bad thing, it turns out hazardous chemicals can be used to make very wonderful, productive things for us. It's just, they're hazardous, right? So anyway, so if you're a company that manufactures hazardous chemicals, and we're talking about things like bleaches, or bases, or caustic material, or even stuff that can get into the eye, or things that can cause cancer. Okay, these are all basically considered to be hazardous things. The government wants you to take care of the people who work for you. And so the branch of the government that is responsible for this is called OSHA. We all know, we've heard of OSHA. OSHA fines so-and-so, so we know about OSHA. But OSHA, it's like the occupational safety branch of the U.S. government. OSHA has some very strict rules for people who deal with hazardous chemicals. What they say is, listen, if you've got that hazardous chemical on your site, we're going to require that you keep a document. And the document, coincidentally, is called a Safety Data Sheet, or an SDS, right? And this sheet has 16 different parts to it, basically saying everything there is to know about that chemical. It starts off with an identification of the chemical. The next part is the hazard identification. Why is it considered to be a hazardous chemical? What horrible things can this hazardous chemical cause to occur? The third part of the section is actually, it's a list of all the ingredients, because it might not just be, if it's like Clorox bleach has a lot of stuff in it, and so you'd have to list out all the stuff that actually goes into it. The fourth part of it is actually first aid. If somebody gets this material on them, what should you do with them? Hose them off? Foam them down? Do something with them, right? The next section has to do with fire safety. If this hazardous chemical catches on fire, what should you do? And as homeowners and people who have kitchens, we know what's important about a fire. Can every fire be put out with water?
No.
No? That's right. Good job, safety people. I'm very proud of you. Okay, the next one has to do with accidental release of it. If it's like in a powder form or something like that, and you accidentally dump it into a fan, and all of a sudden it gets all over, for example, a factory or a warehouse, what should you do then, right? After this comes handling and storing of it. What careful things do you have to do? Should you store it cold? Should you store it hot? Should you just store it in a temperate area? The next aspect of it is exposure and control. You know, if it's toxic, what level of exposure is okay? I mean, radioactive would be obviously something to do, but also just anything that accidentally you could breathe in would be another big issue in that one also. After that comes toxicity. Just how toxic is this thing? After that comes environmental impact. If this got out, what would it do to the surrounding environment that it got into? If I decide that I don't want to have it on my site anymore and I want to dispose of it, what are the rules for disposing of it? Critical issue is transportation. If I choose to take it from one site to another site, what are the rules? Do I have to strap it down? Do I have to put it in a bigger container? What are the rules for transportation? What regulations are there? If I'm moving from state to state or even country to country, are there some regulations associated with this? And then after that comes everything else. So 16 parts to an SDS form. Oh, well, that's good to know and stuff like that. So it turns out that if you make the chemicals, you need to have an SDS. But where things get very interesting is, If you're a truck driver who takes chemicals from one site to another site, while you're transporting it, you need to have the SDS form with you. And it makes sense if your truck tips over or if there's a leak or something like that, and somebody says, okay, what do you got and what should we do about it? The SDS form would be a critical part of what's going on, right? Now, when you get to the next site that you're going to with those chemicals, that site now has a responsibility to have the SDS form on site because those chemicals are there. Now, the example that the people that I work with like to give is toothpaste. It turns out that toothpaste has a whole bunch of chemicals that are basically considered to be hazardous by themselves combined together. So if you're a toothpaste manufacturer, you're going to have SDSs for all the individual ingredients that go into your toothpaste. And when you put them together to make toothpaste, you now have to have a brand new SDS for the toothpaste itself. And when the truck shows up to take the toothpaste to the grocery store, that truck driver needs to have the SDS form on his truck while he's transporting the toothpaste. It's even more interesting when you drop the toothpaste off at Publix, that Publix store needs to have an SDS on file because they've got toothpaste in the store. And I remember when they first told me this, I said, I guess the only person in this chain who doesn't have an SDS is me when I buy the toothpaste. And they pointed out to me that I was incorrect. If you ever take a look on the box of toothpaste, you know there's that little part that says, don't put toothpaste in your eye, don't eat the entire container in one serving, you know, if you do, call 1-800, I'm stupid and I poisoned myself, you know, all that sort of stuff. It turns out that is a subset of the much larger SDS. So we actually do encounter SDSs. So this is where things get sort of interesting, right? So obviously there's a lot of SDSs out there. The estimation is there's about 100 million SDSs out in the wild. Okay? That's a lot of SDSs. Things get sort of interesting. The UN got together a few years ago and said transportation of chemicals between borders is a mess. Every country has their own special way of creating forms for tracking chemicals. We really should come up with a UN standard, and they did. They actually did an excellent job of it. So there's like a global harmonized standard for tracking chemicals. So that's good news. Now the bad news is not very many people have adopted it. Everyone seems to be adopting their own flavor of the global standard, right? The US has theirs, Canada has theirs, Mexico has theirs. The EU actually has done a very good job and has theirs, but then Germany has their own special, et cetera, et cetera. So each one of these countries has sort of a slight tweak of the global standard. So if you're shipping to the EU, you need to take your standard SDS, convert it into EU format so that you can get your chemicals to go into the EU, and vice versa as you go between countries and stuff like that. So clearly SDSs are sort of a big deal as to what's going on here. So SDSs, a critical part of the hazardous chemical industry. But good news, there are firms out there that are automating the creation and processing of SDSs. So you can sleep well tonight, knowing that this challenge is well in hand. Thank you very much.
Wow, interesting stuff. Remember that piece of paper I told you about?